Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.
Okay, would everybody stand and join us in the pledge? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, well, I did say it. Again, we did a denial of report claim, so we'll move on. Is there any item on the agenda that any board member wants taken out of order? No, okay. Comments from the public not on the agenda. We have two. Jasmine, we have two.
I'm going to read both.
Okay.
All at once. So I'll start off with an notice. Items not appearing on the agenda. Notice to the public. For the Brown Act, specifically Government Code Section 54954.2, provides that no action or discussion shall be taken on any item unless it is adequately described in a timely posted agenda. Accordingly, though the public may comment on matters within the board's jurisdiction that do not appear on the agenda, the board cannot respond to such comments without running the risk of deliberating or initiating discussion on topics not properly before the board. Given the prohibitions set forth in the Brown Act and the risk associated with responding to public comments, the board does not respond to the community's questions or comments. The board will respect the rights of the public to express their viewpoints on matters within the board's jurisdiction. However, comments that are defamatory or that violate the privacy rights of any students or individuals may not be protected by law. The board shall not permit any disturbance or willful interruption of board meetings. And then for items that are posted on the agenda, notice to the public, under the Brown Act, the board shall entertain comments on any item appearing on the posted agenda. As the board discusses agenda items, audience participation is permitted. Generally, the president will ask board members for their remarks before recognizing requests to speak from the audience. At the president's discretion, agenda items may be considered in other than numerical order. The board will respect the rights of the public to express their viewpoints on matters within the board's jurisdiction. However, comments that are defamatory or that violate the privacy rights of any students or individuals may not be protected by law. The board shall not permit any disturbance or willful interruption of board meetings.
Thank you. We have two requests. Claudia, do you want to go first, Claudia?
Yes. The sooner the better. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Claudia Figueroa. My English is not so well, so please be patient with me. I wrote these letters with the bottom of my heart, being a mom. And even if I'm not a mom, I care about kids. Because we were kids before too, and I think they don't deserve what is happening in our schools. So okay, let's see. It says like this: The reason why we are here tonight is because we are afraid and feel powerless with what is happening in our schools. We are begging the members of the board to have more security in our schools at all the time, and not letting strangers on campus during school hours. Have them walk through security first. A sign that says, please sign in at office means nothing when the doors are wide open. Cameras in campus that office staff can have access to and remain vigilant during school hours. And I remember one day when my son was in school, something happened, and I asked the secretaries at the school, why you don't check the cameras to see so we can see what the problem was or whatever. And she said, well, only the principal has access to the cameras. So you need to wait for the principal to come and see the cameras, and then we'll go from there. So that's why my recommendation is that the cameras will be in some place where everyone in the office can see, oh, look, somebody's here, somebody's over there. So I don't know, and maybe those are things that maybe it's not going to be like enough to save people's life, but at least it's something that will prevent maybe. So also keep classrooms locked during class time, just to make sure if the shooter does come in on campus, they cannot reach the students easily. And you will think, oh, what about if the students are outside? I know that it's going to be impossible to prevent those things that happen. But maybe a little changes will make difference. Maybe it's a bad example, but just because I live in the orchard, right? And if we got so many mice coming to my house and making mess everywhere, and I complain to the landlord will be the government, right? Hey, when you don't do something, I have these problems in my house and nobody does nothing. But if I get tired of that, I will take my time and look for the holes and try to cover myself, and that's my part of view. So another thing is, most shooters are students themselves. If a student is showing signs of mental or psychological trauma and could grow to become a potential danger to other students, give the child the help that they really need. If the child being bullied, trouble at home, really get to the root of the problem that could make all the difference for the child and for the classmates. And I remember a little story. My older son, he was in school at Tierra Buena, and he was bullied so bad. And that happened 30 years ago. Just imagine myself 30 years ago, if I'm struggling right now with my English. Just imagine 30 years ago how bad that is. So I went to the principal and I asked him, hey, I have problems with these two kids, with my son, they're bullying, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, Mrs. Figueroa, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to grab them, Daniel from his hand and walk all the time at recess? And I thought to myself, oh, he's being sarcastic, So that's why I was thinking, and then I was searching a lot of information on YouTube, and there's this channel where people talk about those problems, and believe it or not, the main reason is that the kids have so many problems. If they don't have problems at school, maybe they have problems at home, and we would like to have more attention for those kids. Days will go by, and we will forget the news of shootings, of the school shootings. But the parents that lost their child to gun violence is still crying over the loss of their loved ones. Every day is a fear that something like this will happen. Not all the schools have the same amount of security. We ask that you please reevaluate the security for the schools and try to prevent another tragedy. It's better safe than sorry. Learn from another mistakes. People always tell me, learn from somebody else's mistakes, so that way you don't mess up, you know? And so that's what I need to say. Yeah.
The board can't respond,
Oh, yeah, I know.
but
Yes.
we clearly understand
Yes.
your feelings and your concerns, and thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Monica?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Domenica Figueroa. I'm her daughter. Former student of YCUSD. Quite a while ago. I'm 26 now. But I was fortunate enough to not have very many, I guess, scary situations when I was in school. There were a couple, and of course, you have your lockdowns, and then you just hide under the desk and you hope that nothing happens. Thankfully, nothing ever did. But my younger sibling, I worry, Sorry. Anyway, sorry. It was brought to my attention that there wow, I was fine 5 minutes ago. Anyway, there are certain educational codes that were brought to my attention. I'm not, very good at the whole legal jargon and everything, but I have it here and I'm going to quote it for you guys. Education code 38000. And it says that the board of the district may, and I quote, establish a security department under the supervision of a chief of security as designated by and under the direction of the superintendent, unquote. I know you guys can't respond, but do we have a chief of security? Just write it down in your notes. Do you have a chief of security? I know you can't respond. It's okay. It also reads in that same section, and I quote, that the district may, quote, employ personnel to ensure the safety of the school district personnel and pupils and the security of the real and personal property of the school district. It is the intent of the legislature in enacting this section that a school district security department is supplementary to city and county law enforcement agencies and is not vested with general policy powers, unquote. So that's just, you understand that better than I do. And then there's another code that I want to bring to your guys' attention. It's Educational Code 38001.5. And the intent of this legislature is, and I quote, to ensure the safety of pupils, staff, and the public on or near California's public schools by providing school security officers with training that will enable them to deal with the increasingly diverse and dangerous situations that they may encounter. When I was in high school, River Valley High School, there was a security officer sitting in the office, just sitting there chatting with secretaries. Not a problem, but it would be nice if he was just walking around in case something were to happen. God forbid, nothing ever happened, but still, things happen and we never expected to, and they just do. So not to say that they weren't doing their job, but I feel like it would have been better to have him patrolling as opposed to just chatting in the office. There's another code that I want to bring to the attention. I have time. Okay, cool. Education Code 38003, which says members of a security or police department of a school district, and I quote, shall be supplied with and authorized to wear a badge bearing the name of the school district. The employee shall carry a suitable identification card bearing his or her photograph, signature, and the signature of the superintendent of the school. Unquote. So I kind of read this as a hall monitor type thing, so they can just kind of be patrolling the schools. And again, like I mentioned, when I was in school, we had just, that one security guard, in charge of the whole high school. River Valley's a big school, especially when I was there, 10 years ago. Wow. There was a lot of kids. So, and I know it took time to get from one side of the campus to the other. I remember I timed it once because I would get out of my Avid class and I'd walk across the campus to my car, and it was a good 5 minutes, and not rushing, maybe 7, if but my point is that if there are things that I mentioned that we can, you guys can do, because honestly, I wasn't going to come because I was like, you know what, I'm sure their turnout's going to be great. Yeah. The thing is, unfortunately, I know people care, but I mean this in the most respectful way possible. I feel like it's just kind of like fighting a war that isn't going to get anywhere, because I don't know if these are codes that are something you guys can act on to make a difference prior to something happening. Because we hear about it in the news, and then it's thoughts and prayers about the president. It's like, okay, but what are you going to do about it? So I wanted to bring you guys, these to your attention because if there's something you can do now, before anything happens, I greatly appreciate it. Not just, my peace of mind and, the kids in my family that I love so much. But I know you guys have kids, you guys have grandkids, and I know you guys would absolutely lose it if something happened to them. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The next item on the board's agenda is, we might have the students here. Public hearing on local, pardon?
I know, I was thinking that too. I was like, oh, we don't have any students to hear from.
Public hearing on local control and accountability plan, staff report, public hearing. Hearing is now open.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we review the 22-23 LCAP. This is part of our 3-year plan, year 2 of our 3-year plan. And, I didn't bring my clicker, I'm waiting on it. Oh,
Yeah, we're gonna scram.
Thank you so
much for listening.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this year we do have new rules. I mentioned this last year. We have carryover rules for our LCAP. So if there are any unused funds, then those funds need to drop and be added into the next year's LCAP. So due to that fact, this year's LCAP will be $44.8 million, which is a lot more than we're used to having for our LCAP. This graph provides you kind of a picture view of the entire LCFF budget. The little sliver there tells you the amount of our, what we would have if we only had just LCAP funds. Now, this is an additional large increase because you'll remember mid-year we talked about how this current year till the end of June, we had 28 million and then an additional 15% that was added, which added an additional 4 million. So that is why we now have a $35 million LCAP moving into 22-23, because there was just a 15% increase to the overall LCAP that will continue year after year. So that's the 35 million. In addition to that, we have a $8.6 million carryover, which that's just rounded, that 9 million there. And that, those two combined, the blue and the red, is what gives us our $44 million LCAP that we will have this year. Okay. This is just a review. If you've been around a while, I know we repeat these each year as part of the process, but there are 8 priorities and 3 goals that go into the LCAP. And they're all listed there for you. Basic services, ensuring that we teach the standards, parent involvement, student engagement, student achievement, of course, the climate of the school, and then ensuring that we offer a broad course of study to students, and then other student outcomes needs that we're providing for the whole student. All right, so we've included all the goals. Goal 1, we call our basic services goal. This is the goal where we account for those priorities 1, 2, and 7 that we just talked about. And in this one, we ensure that we have fully credentialed teachers, the students have all of their curriculum and materials, and the facilities are ready and well maintained. This goal, you'll see that all of the things we do to try to ensure that those basic services are met. That includes teacher training, that collaboration time for staff, PE specialists, so teachers, our elementary teachers have collaboration time, maintaining assistant principals at the school sites, And on that goes. Continued actions for Goal 1 include additional academic support, SCAPE certifications for teachers, are added, and then making sure that the school sites have their own funding to support some of those pieces individually at their site. That is what we currently do. With the input, as you all know, outreach and input in LCAP is a big part of this process. And our stakeholder input, this is what we, for Goal 1, what stakeholders or our educational partners have asked that we look at in addition. So an increase in support programs, which we've already tried to do with our learning loss funds, additional after-school intervention, extended summer school opportunities, our enrichment opportunities, increasing our professional development opportunities for social emotional supports for students, which is something that we are working on. Increasing just student access to teachers in general, increasing campus safety, facility improvement, technology. One of the big ones is we've had a number of requests from students, from our parent communities as for technology that students can take home because they need that level of support and access. Student engagement, giving kids more opportunities for clubs and after-school programs, which we have a lot of new funding for after-school programs that we will be able to address some of those. And then tutoring services as well. We had that request was important for parents last year as well. For Goal 2, this we call for short, we call our student achievement goal. There's a number of specific pieces within this one for our English learners. And one of the good things with regard to this goal, we have put some things in place, and even through COVID, we've been able to maintain our reclassification rates that we had before. We've even closed the gap a little bit with the hotels, but that is something we're still needing to do, is work on closing the gap for our English learners, the long-term English learners. So with this goal, we focus on professional development for around those specific pieces, on using online tools for staff and students, maintaining our coordinators that help support schools, our college career ready curriculum, those programs, those CTE programs that give kids the opportunity to learn about different types of careers while they're in middle school. And then, we have them as well for high school, but we have really worked to try to apply those at the middle school level. Then your college campus tours, we pay specifically for all of the additional ELD teachers we have at middle school through this. And then the sites also receive additional funds for this. As far as what parent input was, all stakeholder-wide input was improvement in integrated ELD. And that means integrated in terms of the English language development, professional development that we provide to teachers that don't teach ELD all day. Different supports for them to be prepared to support those kids in their classrooms. And then math committee, which we already put in place for our A to G grant. Increased preparation to help students with SAT and ACT. Some colleges still want that information and students still are requesting support with it. After school intervention, which we did a lot of through our learning loss. After school opportunities and expanding sports programs for students. And then I put this quote in there because I was from a student. The furniture is uncomfortable. And we have already begun the work to improve student learning environments. I'll quote Dina in one of our meetings. She said, they laid in their bed to do their homework for an entire year. And now they come back to school and they sit in those chairs all day. And it is different and uncomfortable, I'm sure, after that. And then continuing gate support and funding for clubs and student engagement. That was for goal 2. With respect to goal 3, this goal we call our parent involvement, student engagement goal. Most all of the things are related there. Those are priorities 3, 5, and 6. And with this one, we address our PBIS. This is where with student engagement, kids can't be successful in school until they're safe and happy in their surroundings. So PBIS, our counseling programs are paid for through here. Our reset rooms, the professional development for our counselors, the home to school transportation, close to all of our transportation comes out of here. Our reduced high school counselor ratio, there are expanded summer school options are paid for through here, credit recovery, our social workers, and so on. And then continuing on with this one, our parent liaisons, our communications, all of our communications websites, InterQuest K9 services, our attendance monitoring program. In terms of our stakeholders or educational partners and what their recommendations are for this particular goal were all to add options for middle school and high school for earlier intervention, an increase in the number of social workers, counselors, and parent liaisons that we have, increase in school safety, increases in connectedness for students and schools, and getting back to those family and event nights that we have. And that is something that is of high interest to the schools as well. We want to get back to some of those events where families and students can come onto campus after school. An increase in LGBTQ sensitivity and knowledge and training for both staff and students, facilities improvement, and then continuing K-12 summer school, because you remember for many years due to budget, we only had high school summer school. It was pretty universal across that people wanted to continue the summer school, both academic and the additional enrichment opportunities. Okay, so for new additions to the LCAP for this year, you're aware that we are putting in the wellness centers at each school site. We had some additional campus supervisors added this year. 5 additional certificated social workers, Care Solace Services. That is a program where it's like a platform where families that would like to know who is available in their community to provide support can reach out. They will have a counselor that guides them to a place where they can receive the services they need. So across behavioral health there for families. And they can just log in and take advantage of that one-to-one interaction on what their needs are and who is available in the community to support them with that. And Chromebooks for students, technology upgrades for classrooms. This one is long overdue. Mr. Bentley is working with the tech department to really define what all of that might look like, and that will be a big portion of our purchases for these extra funds in our LCAP. We discussed the new playgrounds for school sites, and then a certified nursing assistant program, and then expanding through our ELOP, expanding our after-school, both academic and enrichment opportunities for students. Okay, any questions so far? No, it's been kind of rapid fire.
I have a question, or maybe just a comment. When you were talking about like the committees that you guys are forming, or at least that's what came out of like the input when you guys do that, is the intent to have also representation from like your ELD teachers and your special ed teachers? If you
Yes, when we take input, we get input from all teachers.
Well, specifically, maybe I'll speak to the math committee that you're talking about for K-12 improvement. I think you stated that you guys were already have started that, right?
We have started.
Okay.
We've started our secondary. We haven't started our elementary.
Okay. When you guys do that, would you guys facilitate involvement from the ELD and the spec community too?
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome.
Anything else on where we are at this point? Okay, for our local indicators are also a piece of our LCAP that we monitor. And that includes the implementation of standards, and then ensuring that we have access to a broad course of study. The implementation of academic standards, we have, our Common Core standards. Those have been in place over time now, so we have reached full implementation. Access to a broad course of study, we have over almost now 150 different options for students to take over the course of their high school career. So we are well within a positive range for that. In terms of conditions and climate, the things we monitor there are all the Williams pieces, ensuring that our teachers are appropriately credentialed, that are teaching the classes that we do, that our facilities review each year, and we are always found to be in good repair there. In terms of parent and family engagement, we do the surveys, and we provide those opportunities and include families. School climate, we provide the CHIC survey, and I'll review a little bit of that data now so you can get an idea. And this screen looks a lot better on the computer screen than on these. Hopefully you can see it a little bit better on your copy. But there are 4 required grades that we review these specific pieces, and that is on school connectedness, school safety, and then academic motivation in general and how the students report out. This is actually, we specifically wanted to look at the CHIC survey this year. That's called it CHIC So Long, California Healthy Kids Survey. Thank you. After a while, you don't remember what those acronyms mean anymore. But with these, this is lower than what we're used to seeing, and it is a little alarming. And it's something that we want to look at moving forward. We know this is a challenge across the board, but like I said, we did the Healthy Kids because everybody does Healthy Kids. And then the fall, when we can start to look at all of that data across California and really get a better idea of where we are with that. But the school connectedness one is usually one because kids in general have a lot of school spirit wherever they go, whatever it is, they love their school. And that one is really a lot lower than we're used to seeing. The school safety, we can understand a little bit more. It's been weird with feeling safe at school with things in the news and then also things with COVID. And do you look like you were going to ask a question?
I am.
And then, so that one is less of a surprise because there's a number of factors involved in that. Plus, we've had more fights and suspensions on campus this year. Academic motivation is also a big concern, and that's one that we want to really monitor and see if we can dive in. Now that we have this baseline of information, when we come back in the fall, do some follow-up and really see if we can get to the bottom of what some of these things mean for us.
I mean, I was going to say, my gut kind of tells me this is all COVID related, right? And the fact they were homeschooled. Do you have any comparisons with other school districts?
We don't yet, and that's what I was saying in the fall. That's why we want Chicks is important because that's one that's done across California where we can really take a look and get some comparison data and then really understand what we need to follow up on. Right now, we can only surmise.
If you can share the comparisons when you get them.
Yeah, of course.
So what is this a representation of? So like 67% of fifth graders said they felt connected at school? Or
Yes. Yes, so these are, and you can't, I know my percentage there, you can't see the little percent sign.
So is it like one question or is it like averaging?
It's averaging several questions, so I can give you some examples. So like school connectedness in, fifth grade looks like, I like my school, I enjoy coming to school, I'm excited about school, participating in school activities and that sort of thing. In 9th and 11th are, the questions are a little more sophisticated and it's around, I enjoy time spent in class. I find it purposeful. It becomes more sophisticated questions and, I root for my school, and I support my school's functions, teams, etc. School safety, those are asking, do you feel safe at school? But also a factor in there is, have you been bullied at school? Do you feel bullied at school? Those all play a factor in how a sense of well-being at school and school safety. And then the academic motivation is, school is important to me, education is important to me. I think I will do, school is important to my life. And so those are the types of questions, depending on the grade level that you get there. My teachers, I feel like my teachers care about me. That comes up in the school connectedness one. But those are the types of questions in there.
Those are really alarmingly low.
They are,
What would they have been, maybe 4 years ago? Way pre-COVID.
They weren't, we had 70%, so maybe some high 60s at the high school level. Your 11th graders,
Well,
they're gonna say what they're gonna say, but especially 5 and 7 are all gonna be in the 70s and 80s. Because the kids in 5th grade do love their school. They like their friends and all, but things are a little challenged. In terms of just the bigger scheme of understanding our breakdown of expenditures, and I shared with you last year so you can, kind of understand it a little bit better. Our personnel expenses are 23 million and our non-personnel expenses this year are about 21 million. So that puts us at about a 52% of the salary, specifically supporting additional support personnel for school sites. So it's important to understand that our LCAP really is a huge chunk of our LCAP really is people. Last year though, because we didn't have, when we started the year, we didn't start with that, additional 15% of the LCAP, and we didn't have that carryover. So last year our LCAP was 70% support personnel, and I'd bring that to your attention because once we expend this, the next year we're going to be back in the 70% range. And it's important to kind of understand that in big picture for LCAP. Okay, so any questions?
I have a concern, like looking at the survey, and also just what we've heard this school year. And I know that we're doing, we're headed in the right direction as far as increasing social workers, I think 5 FTE. I wonder if that's enough, just thinking out loud, like if the counseling is enough, do you have enough to really target the students that are in need in that moment? plus with all the other roles and responsibilities and I don't know, is that, or do we need to add more? I don't know.
You know, we rolled out and implemented this year, or piloting this year, our wellness centers. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to visit, but so that was like step one in some pieces that we're moving forward on. The additional social workers, we knew we had to make that adjustment just based on credentialing. Last year, we gave it a year to fully let that transition materialize. And then on top of those 4 that we've moved into those positions, we have actually hired or in the process of hiring a 5th, and that is on top of the 2 classified, that's 5 certificated on top of the 2 classified social workers that we have, and we already had a comprehensive counseling program. I don't know that any of us can say, oh, this is enough, but we are every year adding on and trying to continue to provide, the space and additional support services. It's something that will just have to be a continued conversation and review.
This is a public hearing, correct? So the California Healthy Kids Survey, have we done that every year at Yuba-Sutter Unified?
No. We have done pieces of it within a different format. We used to do a program called Panorama. And the reason that we had moved to that one was because it gave you options to do all kinds of other cool features to be able to break apart and review and analyze data. The reason that we left there is because it's very expensive, number one, and number two, we weren't really feeling like we were getting a whole lot out of it for what it was providing. And then the Healthy Kids Survey across the state districts are using that, and it gives us a better basis of information. And West Ed now provides districts with ways to use that information to break it all out, and then it's a lot less expensive for us.
Thank you. I looked it up a little bit to see that there's no data for Yuba-Sutter Unified, but there also appears to be a staff survey. So that might also be another way to address how do we all get on board, because student safety and student wellness is so important to all of us and so important right now, that might be another way to help us get on board. I have a few other questions about the LCAP. So you indicated that there were themes that surfaced from the data analysis and stakeholder input. How are those going to be incorporated into the LCAP, such as how will we increase physical education, and I believe that was through PE specialists at the elementary, but will those be increased, and will be increasing elementary music and elementary art opportunities?
Okay. We're not going to increase any this year. We don't plan to increase any in terms of PE specialists. We have all of our ELOP funds, so we want to be able to provide additional opportunities after school for students through different sports programs. We share out what is listed each year in terms of requests. We can't add all of the list every year.
It's just there, with all the carryover money, it just seems a wonderful opportunity. The other one I was curious about was the alternative education opportunities at early intervention. Is there any plans to implement the alternative ed options? This board previously considered and saw plans for an alternative ed option for 8-9 at Gray Avenue. Are there any plans to bring that back again?
Not for this current LCAP. Now, in terms of the carryover, I just want to make sure everyone understands the $44 million carryover that we have this year has to be spent this year. Those are this year's funds. We may end up having some carryover for next year, but the plan is to spend those funds. And then we'll be back next year to the 35 million. That carryover is one-time funds for this year.
And Pam, the carryover is a result because of the one-time funds that came into the district, and there was a lot of overlap in terms of the use of those funds, and those funds have timelines that have to be expended.
Right. So we had some overlapping goals within ESSER 3 as far as all of the intervention things that we would have normally spent our LCAP funds on. We spent with some of those ESSER 3 dollars. So that is the reason for some of the carryover. Plus some of those funds that the extra 15%, that $4 million that I shared, we talked about back in February, that was came in July that we didn't know that were coming when we wrote the previous LCAP. That was a governor's approval.
Are there any questions? Pardon? One more question?
Four more?
One more. Instructional coaches. We didn't have them this year due to staff shortages. Will there be instructional coaches next year?
I would love to return to having instructional coaches right now until we have all of our positions filled and plus additional. There's no point in hiring them just to put them back in the classroom. So we will see how it goes in August. If we think we're in good shape, we can fly positions based on the amount of staffing that we have. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mercedes?
I don't have one, but Mercedes
I have a
does.
question. I have a question regarding the social workers. So social workers were traditionally in the classified unit. We had one teacher that became a social worker, therefore moved it into the credentialed unit as well. So why is it that we have added 4 or 5 new social workers on the credentialed side, but not on the classified side where they really are housed?
We had a couple of years ago, we had a change in the rules around social workers and what certification qualified to be a school social worker, specifically an academic social worker. And you had to have the PPS that was for academic school counseling, to be a school counselor. And that's the PPS. There are 3 other classifications of PPS, and one of them is a social worker. However, we had just in our own counseling ranks 4 of the social worker certification. So they could no longer be a school counselor with their PPS was incorrect for that role. So we had moved them into a role that their certification allows, and that is to be a social worker. And then just for what we were planning to do, we added an additional one. So their role will be slightly different, but they were already certificated. PPS is it's a certificated role. The qualification of our classified is MSFW, I think. Yes. So that's the difference. Certification.
Or do you have any other questions or observations at the time?
Is any of this money, because I see that visiting college campuses is a goal for both middle and high school kids, but right now we don't have any bus drivers. So how are we going to?
Well, that is still if we are able to hire, we don't want to eliminate those as an opportunity until we know we can't. And this year, we did have some of the avid, at least at the high school level, still able to go, not as extensively as we've done in the past, but we did have some go.
And that would kind of be the justification, Shelley. If we're not able to meet one of the goals because of circumstances that are outside our control, Pam has to explain that in the LCAP at the end.
I get that. It's just, I've seen the signs go up, and
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else? I just have one observation, Pam, and maybe it's just me. I think this plan weighs heavily on college-bound students. I don't see a lot, my perception, for kids that may not want to go to college. It seems like the push is, gate, and I'm not knocking it, increase SAT, ACT. It just seems like it's heavily weighted towards kids that want to go to college, and we're losing kids that don't want to go to college, or for whatever reason. So where in this report does it push for voc ed?
Well, we just started a new CNA program, so we have added a CTE program. What you're referring to, it was a request of us to provide, from students, to provide some additional support around that area. We can add additional, if that's something that the board chooses to pursue, any specific CTE pathway. We have to do research in the community. There's a process that you have to go through, but we can pursue anything of interest that we have the funds and all to support. But that would be something that would come from the
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So when you say you have to reach out to the community, are you saying that if we want to pursue that particular pathway, or is it still an option to provide the students the exposure and not necessarily create the pathway?
We could do exposure, but what I'm talking about is there has to be, in order, one of the foundational pieces of developing a CTE pathway is you have to identify a need in the community. So that's what I'm saying. We have to consider what options that we think our students would meet students' needs, and then take a look at our community, identify those needs, and move forward with that.
So can I get I do better if I'm a little bit more specific than just broad generalization. So if there's a need for, let's say, HVAC technicians, who can work on, heating and air conditioning systems, is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. If we can identify a need and then develop some relationships with companies in the community that would hire those potential candidates, our students, then work out that relationship where our students can go and get work experience and visit and see how those things work. That's one piece of the process.
This is a smaller community, and most of the signs on board, I'm sure, have been, we're hiring. They're like fast food and stuff like that. What's to encourage a kid that we have something for him or her? I mean, when you talk about going to businesses to develop the needs, what businesses are you talking?
So it's not really going business to business, it's really about looking at the labor market and the community in terms of what's needed within the labor market. So there is actual survey information regarding the need within Yuba-Sutter counties regarding what the labor market is looking for.
Well, the unions have come to us on several occasions and said, give us your best and brightest, and we don't have an answer for them, and that's been going on for 10 years.
Right, but remember also, we also hit a construction slump, and so there wasn't a need for that labor market. I think it's increasing right now, and there's a high need for it, but there was a time where there was surveys being out there in terms of the labor market, but I do think it's time, and I know Martin does that, in terms of what the labor market is showing within our community in terms of the needs.
Can I ask a question like that? I know we can talk separately too if you think it's more appropriate. Like when you say what the needs are of this community, let's just say pertaining to construction or maintenance workers that own like highways, right? Like a lot of companies like Caltrans or whatnot, it's not the need in this particular community, even though there's, Caltrans in Marysville, like they go when they work at satellite sites that they, like makeshift sites, right? Like Reading or whatever, wherever the need is, that's where the kids go. Excuse me, that's where the workers go.
And so there is other survey information, so it's the local community as well as the state and then nationally. So
Okay.
those we have, we can pull that information to kind of see what the trends are.
One of the caveats with getting CTE funds, though, is they're looking for you to solve a local problem. But we can review and what our options are with regard to that, if that's something.
I was just interested in the percentages of kids that go to college from here and the percentage that really take a more vocational avenue. And at some point, I would like that information because I just don't see it. I mean, I agree with Jasmine that there are the large Caltrans, and this isn't killing the messenger, I'm just saying it's fact. That we have kids that have told me, and I'm sure Shelley's heard it, and Jess, I want to go to college. And I don't know what to say to them because
Pam, that also information that we have to pull and we have to report to the state. So we do have the
We
percentage
have
of
to
kids
report our college going rate,
as well as our CT
whether
completers.
it's 4-year or 2-year, our CTE levels of participation and so on. Now, we also want to really take the time and investigate our A to G concerns. We have deep concerns in terms of our student academics. We want to make sure they're not choosing not to go to college because it's a challenge. So that's one of the other things that we're really taking a hard look at with our A to G rates. Our kids are coming in and starting high school and intro to integrated instead of a non-grade level math. So these are all pieces that we have to review.
don't you feel it's a challenge? I mean, the kids that are coming in and they're not enrolling for college courses, you said because it's challenging. Well, there's a lot of kids out there that it is very challenging for them, and they know they're just not going to be college material, so they're going to be looking for another route, which is what Lynette is talking about.
I think there's a slice of the pie for every single piece of that, and our board priorities kind of reflect that. And Pam, you put that in our presentation too. I think the CTE piece, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're probably just asking, like, what is the slice of pie of that pie that we're going to allocate for students that are not going the college path?
Well said.
Yeah, we can absolutely take a look at that. We currently have 20.
I'm just one board member. I agree.
We have 20 CTE pathways currently, but we can pull specific data, absolutely.
Student CTE pathways, those seem to be very heavy academics.
And we can look at that too.
Okay. Any other questions, guys? Thank you, Pam. Public hearing is now closed. This was for information. The next public hearing is the proposed budget. Hearing is now, I like these. I take this home.
I just want to stay out of the swinging rates. Well, good evening. So thank you, Pam. Actually, you wherever you So, it's interesting, these presentations, the LCAP takes a lot of time to prepare educational services, fiscal, interaction with principals and staff. The 77-page LCAP whittled down to a few slides, so I know it's hard for us to get all the information to you, and I'm going to do the same thing with a budget that's 200 pages long, and I'm going to try to get into a few slides here. So if I miss some things that you want more information on, please ask, and I'll either get it to you right now or I'll get back to you. So the LCAP presentation was on $45 million of the budget, and that's our supplemental concentration funds. And we're going to talk about the whole budget on a summary level, which is about $190 million worth of expenses. So I need to also just kind of thank my staff. Laura Eske's in the audience here. Her team puts a ton of effort into developing all of this work. We work with our principals, our departments, our staff, and of course cabinet to gather all this information, and of course with board priorities and put them together. So as far as just where we are at in the cycle, the budget cycle is essentially 21 months long. It's pretty extraordinary. So at any particular time, we have to get our heads straight. I mean, are we talking about the budget that we're just closing, the budget from last year, the budget we're in right now, or the budget we're preparing for next year? So you just kind of put this graphical on there to give you an idea of the budget cycle, and it really does take 21 months, and they overlap. So it does get a little confusing. But the budget process starts in January. That's when the governor comes out and gives his proposal for the budget. They have an idea where revenues are trending. And then and that actually kind of, basically the key there is, are we increasing or are we going to have to start cutting positions? That's kind of the indicator, because that helps us start from January through May and June. We're working on all the expense side. And then in May is when the governor does kind of the budget revision. The governor's had a lot of chance to work with the legislature to identify priorities, and they're kind of negotiating the whole way. May is really the governor's best guess of what we should be expecting for revenues, and then they have to pass the budget basically now by June 30th. Now, interesting, right now what just happened is the legislature kind of came back to the governor, and basically they did not come to agreement. So the legislature put something onto the governor's desk that the governor's not really in agreement with right now. So it'll be very interesting to see what actually happens by June 30th or whenever they work this out. So the legislature is looking for more money going to schools, which is great. The governor's basically saying, I don't think this is sustainable. I mean, that's the basic argument right now. And then once the budget's actually passed, we're going to come back in August and tell you, kind of what actually got passed, and we'll make revisions to the budget based on the revenue changes. So, big picture on the revenue side of things. Local control funding formula is the bulk of our revenue, so that's why we spend a lot of time talking about it. And in the local control funding formula, a portion of that is your supplemental concentration dollars. That is the report you just saw on the LCAP. That's that $45 million. That includes some of the carryover money. Generally, we in our current year funding, kind of third line there, we have $36 million of 22-23 supplemental concentration dollars in this. For the funding formula, we're expecting basically a 6.5% increase. Now that's on 6.5% increase on the per student funding. I'll show you another slide. We're actually projecting less students, so it doesn't turn into, we don't get all of that if we have less students going to our schools. So 6.5% with statutory cost of living adjustment, but the governor's proposing adding an additional 3.5%, what he's calling an augmentation, and it's a dollar amount per student per grade level, per grade span level. But that really does bring up the total increase on the per student funding to close to 10% increase over 21-22 levels. Now, kind of some of the big new stuff, or newer stuff, or one-time stuff. Expanding Learning Opportunities program, $3.2 million. This is really for the tutoring after school, the summer school programs. And then we are still working, the other actually big piece here is in the governor's proposal. It's one-time funding, and it's called a discretionary grant. It's basically $1,500 per kiddo based on this year's attendance reporting. So we're estimating that to be about $15 million. And of course, as we've talked about many times over the years here, we have a lot of COVID funds. And in the 22-23 budget, that's $33 million of restricted COVID funds that are expected to come in this year. Special education, we have a cost of living adjustment of 6.5% plus. I kind of put that little plus there because it's basically 6.5% on the state side of funds. We don't know what we're going to be receiving on the federal side. And the plus is the governor's put in $500 million to supplement special education, but that is the entire state of California, so I don't really know what that's going to mean on a district our size, but that's the plus. And in this budget, we are expecting to need to do a contribution to support special education of just over $19 million. And this is my last little kind of segment there is it's proposed in this budget to get basically a little relief for our attendance, all the attendance issues that the state of California has been seeing due to COVID. This last year has been very challenging as far as schools staying open, quarantining classrooms, all this type of stuff, doing independent study and getting credit for that independent study. So really attendance for 21-22 has been horrible in our district and most of the districts that I'm talking to as well. So this is a statewide problem. So essentially what's proposed is we're going to get the better of one of these three options. Current year, average daily attendance, prior year, ADA, or an average over the last 3 years. So that could help kind of smooth out the dip in attendance that we saw in the 21-22 school year.
Can I ask you a real quick question?
Please, yes.
And the special education COLA for state is 6.5. Is that on top of the cost of living adjustment 6.5, or are those the same thing? Because I noticed it's on special education, but it's also on local control.
So
I want to make sure everybody understands that.
Local control total about a 10% increase.
Okay.
State portion of special education funding, which is a separate funding source, is the 6.5%. We don't know what the federal piece of that.
Right. I just wanted to make sure because it was in two spots that it was separate. So.
Yeah.
So people understood.
Yeah, that's a good question. I tell you, I put these together. Sometimes I don't. I know I live and breathe this. So sometimes
I know. That's why I wanted to ask because it kind of looks like it's different. It's saying, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
This is a slide basically on what I've already told you, but basically we're getting $1,500 per ADA for the discretionary block grant. It is it's one-time money, so it can't really be spent on things that reoccur. People. I showed this slide at probably first and second, definitely second there on. So I'm not going to really go over it. But really, the point of this slide is we still are working through a lot of COVID funds. They are restricted, they are temporary, and this is a plan that does just continue to kind of get adjusted as that needs. In the expense, very summary, big picture factors here. So the notable factors affecting expenses, we have pretty significant increases to the employer cost to PERS and STIRS. So STIRS costs are increasing by 2.2% to 19%. PERS costs have increased of 2.5%, getting up to 25%. So for every dollar we spend on salaries for those, it costs us $1.20 or $1.25. So it's something to take note. However, this is the first time I'll be able to say this in almost since my first year of doing this. We don't expect our projections are that we will not have this increase in PERS and STIRS costs going forward. That can very well change, but right now we have flat expectations going forward. That will help offset kind of some of the upward pressure to the budget that we've been feeling over the last.
Is it what PERS and STIRS is telling you?
That's what School Services California and some of the other work groups that that analyzes this stuff. So, I mean, actually, with the markets going down, could very well affect those contribution rates.
That's why I was wondering because I know PERS has said that the next 3 years there would be actually more increases. So that's why I wanted.
Right now, the projections are actually on PERS that they're going down, and STIRS is staying flat, but those numbers can't vary. And with the markets right now.
Right.
Yeah. I would say a couple of numbers that I am not very comfortable with in all of this right now because they keep changing, and that is the cost of living adjustment in my projections and inflation it's just such a volatile number right now. So that's my second kind of bullet point. Inflation's on the rise. It is just rough out there. We all know. We see the gas. It's hitting us in every way at the school district. And significant one-time in the budget, you'll notice, I'll try to point it out, but we have some significant one-time expenses associated with COVID funds and supplemental concentration carryover funds. This is a new concept, so this is actually a slide the School Services of California got put out to us, so I just thought I'd put it in here. So we are limited on what we can carry over in any fund balance to 10%. That 10% includes what our mandatory reserve of 3%, and then we can keep an additional 7% beyond that. So a lot of districts are trying to figure out what do they do, if they have excess. Most districts try to have more than 10% ending fund balance because it really helps smooth out if you have downturns in the economy, which I think most people think that we are heading towards. So this is a perfect storm in a long way that I like to see is like, we're at this area where we have our cap on ending fund balance is hitting, and we're all kind of seeing inflation and pressures on the economy that could point us in the wrong direction. But it is what it is. So these are the things you can do with the money, or examples of some of the things that you can do with excess dollars above that 10%. You can commit the funds. So that's basically in your fund one, your general fund. You can say, hey, the board is going to take formal action and reserve that money for a purpose. You have to explain the purpose. You can make a contribution to a restricted resource in your general fund. So we have unrestricted and restricted dollars or resources. I would say if districts are going to do this, it would most likely probably put it in resource 8150, which is their deferred restricted routine maintenance fund, because all districts have real big needs there. You can transfer it to other funds, and that's what we're doing in this budget. So we are basically carving off anything about 10% and putting it into Fund 14, which is a deferred maintenance fund, because we know we have a lot of needs here. And that's the board's number one priority right now. And then you can get exemptions from the county, but there's some restrictions on that. So that's just kind of some of the things you can and can't do with it, and there's some examples.
Can I ask a question, Scott? How much above 10% do we have? Did we have a second?
It was over $20 million between what was in Fund 1 and Fund 17, because Fund 1 and Fund 17 combined is what you have to count.
Yeah, it was 15%.
We had 15%.
Was it at 15%?
We had 15%.
Yeah, so we had the 12% additional to the 3% mandate. That was based on last year's figures, but this year it's a little bit higher because of all the money. It's based on your expenditures, and that includes all the COVID money that we're spending. So it fluctuates a little bit as far as the percentage, but those were last year's numbers, 12%.
I'd get a better number though instead of the board on that. So the enrollment trend, just want to put this is kind of what I alluded to. We're getting basically an increase of 10% per student, but we're projecting a decline in enrollment. And so this is just the graph there, a little information on the methodology. But you can see, it's been trending down. And when you see, 20, 21, 22, you really see some number shifts there. So I have projected that our enrollment is going to be 11,661. I hope I am drastically wrong on this number. But this is a standard, industry standard as far as the methodology of projecting the enrollment out. So this is kind of just what the numbers say. And I'm hoping, almost even expecting a little bit that we're going to get a little COVID bounce back. So that's the goal. I hope I'm wrong on this number. So COVID funds, just a little summary of the allocations that we've received and the spending that has happened to date. 2021, so the total number is roughly $73 million. We spent a little over $10 million in 2021. 21-22, we're expecting a little over $11 million. In the 22-23 budget, we have $23 million, and then the remaining is $28 million that we have to spend. We basically have by the end of 2023, because final reporting is really September 24. So these are the extra dollars that we're that are jockeying for some of the other things that we're trying to do with supplemental concentration, funds, A graphical of our revenues, and I'll get into the numbers on the next slide, but essentially, as I spoke before, the local control funding formula is the bulk of that. Normally, that would be even a larger percent than 65%, but we have the one-time state funds in here, and we have a significant chunk of one-time COVID funds in here as well. Typically, local control funding formula is going to be more than 75, 80, 85% of your total funding. the expenditure side. Also, just kind of a graphical for the visuals in the audience here. What you'll notice is the bulk of our expenses are on certificated salaries, classified salaries, and benefits. We are in the people business. And so the remainder of that is, it covers everything else that we do. And also what's also a little different is actually the percentages on the certificate, classified, and benefits is typically a lot higher. But again, we have a lot of kind of one-time spending going on for COVID and carryover funds from sub-loan concentration, so that goes that up a little bit too.
Scott, what is capital outlay?
So capital outlay would be basically improvements to facilities. It could be major equipment as well, but anything that you capitalize, in our case, I think our capitalized special is 5,000?
7,500.
7,500. So anything that, any individual item that costs more than $7,500, we capitalize, and it's an accounting, it's in a normal business, you would amortize it over expenses, but for us, it's just, we put it in a different category of expense. It's a major expense.
As a specific example, would this be like the new portable classrooms put in at
Yes, perfect. Trucks, if we buy, vehicles, $20,000 vehicles, that would, we do that.
So that's only 1%, but it looks like we're spending 13% on books and supplies. That's a lot.
So very good question, because so I'm talking about Fund 1 here, and we tend to spend most of our capital expenditures out of Fund 49 in the past. That will be switching to Fund 14 going forward. So those capital expenditures typically have not happened in this fund, in our major general fund. But that's a good question, and these are the things sometimes I don't catch as far as the presenter. All right, so the general fund, this is a breakout. It's still a lot of numbers. I know I reduced it compared to, I think, how it's been presented in the past, but it's still a lot of information to cover. But you'll notice this is 22, 23. The columns are unrestricted, restricted, and then the last column just combines all the dollars. I also kind of stripped out some of the transfers that we're doing to Fund 14, and you kind of see that bottom line there, that is our operating surplus or deficit, because that transfer that's in the financials can confuse what your actual position is. Are you operating at a surplus or a deficit? So these numbers, really the way to look at the health of your district is that unrestricted column, because those are the dollars that you can do anything with. The restricted dollars, you have to do a certain thing. So that unrestricted column is the health of your district. Any questions on social lines? Sometimes people get confused over this little point. Well, okay. The contribution to restricted between unrestricted and restricted, that gets confusing for some people. So essentially we have special education and restricted routine maintenance are the two major contributions we make from our unrestricted side of our funding to the restricted. So that $19 million that I said that we have to make a contribution to special ed, that's 19 of that 29 million. The other $10 million is our routine restricted dollars that is also in the restricted account. So those are transfers that we have to make to support those programs. You see that operating surplus of $6.7 million. That accounts for the additional revenues that we have, but of course we have not finished negotiations with our labor unit, so we are going to need some sort of surplus in order to support how that turns out. Our ending fund balance. We have the significant portion of our ending fund balance is the restricted resources, mostly COVID dollars. Some 30 million of that is COVID dollars, and roughly 5 million is ELOC kind of carryover at this point. The 10% equates to the middle three rows, the 5.9 million to 50,000 and 13 unassigned dollars. Those are the different areas that the 10% applies to. The 10% does not apply to restricted resources. When we do our multi-year projections, we are looking at current year plus 2 years, so 23-24 and 24-25. These are some of the major assumptions driving those numbers. On the revenue side, ADA, so our funded average daily attendance, you'll see that those numbers are declining due to the enrollment decline. The LCFF, cost of living adjustment / augmentation, you see the 10% there in this current year. Projections for the out years are 5.3 and 4%. Those are the numbers that I think are wild cards right now, along with the kind of bottom row there that shows inflation. They're projecting 6% in 22-23, 3% and 2% beyond that. I think this is kind of guesses at this point from our economists, but those are the numbers that are in there. And then in the middle of those assumptions, that's where you see the CalSTRS and employer and CalPERS numbers. In the past, I would always show that because there was such a pressure on the budget that it was a major factor that we had to take a look at. So now, this is a hard thing to show. This is our multi-year projections, and we have a lot of moving parts in this. That's why it's hard. We have a lot of one-time stuff. We have a lot of one-time expenses. We have a lot of one-time federal dollars and state dollars. So it's a little deceiving to look at the bottom line on this, and I'm going to kind of go through an example of what I mean by that. I'm just going to go really to the second from bottom line, change in ending fund balance. You see a $32 million positive number. That's not red, right? It doesn't have brackets on it, so it's a positive number. That's the COVID dollars coming in. That's a big, I just mentioned we have $33 million coming in for COVID. That's mostly the COVID dollars represented there, falling to the bottom line. And then you see negatives, because this is a combination of our unrestricted and restricted all together. You see the negatives in the out years, basically spending that down over the next few years. That's planned deficit spending. That is not the district's in trouble. Okay? That is just, we received it, and now we got to get it out of our ending fund balance and spend it down. This is where I have a little disconnect. That bottom yellow line, change in unrestricted ending fund balance, as I mentioned in the prior slide when we had unrestricted and restricted together, unrestricted is the health of your district. So I just wanted, that bottom line does not relate to the combined above, but it just highlights that the change in unrestricted ending fund balance, are we operating at a surplus or a deficit is what this is saying. So it also includes transfers to Fund 14, and that's kind of why these numbers are hard to show what this is there. It's a little convoluted, but at the end of the day, these are relatively stable numbers in our unrestricted side. We have other funds, our Child Development Fund, Child Nutrition, and the Deferred Maintenance Fund that we've just been talking about. And so net increase or decrease in fund balance, you see our Child Development is a little bit of a surplus that'll be absolutely gobbled up as we go through negotiations, I'm sure. We have a negative number of $600,000 in the Child Nutrition Fund. That is planned deficit spending. We can only carry so much ending fund balance in the Child Nutrition Fund. And then they say, hey, and with COVID, that fund got a little wonky over the last couple of years. So we have to spend down that ending fund balance, and the Child Nutrition Department has been doing that. We're working on plans to do that. That's planned deficit. That's planned spending of your ending fund balance. And then you see some of the big numbers in the Deferred Maintenance Fund. You'll see a transfer in of $29 million. That's from Fund 1 and Fund 17 coming into Fund 14. So that went from under $1 million to $31 million. Now, this sounds like a lot of money, but in the big picture of 16 schools, district offices, warehouses, bus yards, as far as doing improvements to all of the property that we have, that is actually a drop in the bucket compared to what is needed to make the necessary improvements to this district. So that's a good start. But that's not going to get the district where it needs to be. Special Reserve Fund 17, and this just kind of shows that any fund balance going to zero. This is transferred to 14. And then the Melrose Fund 49, this is a collection of our Melrose taxes, and this goes for maintenance and expansion of facilities.
So that's the elimination of Fund 17. This slide.
That is that is consolidating 17 and the excess over 10% in Fund 1 into Fund 14 for facilities and those. And Fund 14 can be redirected in different ways. At some point, if there's a change of priorities, that absolutely can this is prerogative there.
I think just kind of going back to what the piece that I talked about with Pam too, just, I don't know how many board priorities we have. I think we did reduce them from 18 to a little bit less. If there's some way that we can see what piece of the pie we're gonna allocate to each of those priorities.
So you'll see, so your number one priority is facility.
Yeah.
Facilities, so you're seeing $23 million new dollars going into that, correct?
Yeah, from 17.
Correct. But what I'm saying is, like, I understand that piece. Just like how much are we allocating for the other
the total budgeting to the priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is interesting. So this is ending fund balance and operating budget are two very, very different things. Because operating budget is what you can do on a regular recurring basis. It's people. We're 85% people as far as our budget typically. So that's your operating budget. Your ending fund balance is you're saving up for a rainy day. You're saving up for a project, for facilities. Because once it's gone, it's gone. It's like your savings account, right? So you can't spend your ending fund balance on things that are recurring. A lot of people get confused on that, and it's just.
Can I ask another question, Scott?
Yeah.
There's like 3 or 4 or 5 housing developments going in. I would imagine, I think I understand the way California does it. The Melrose, those will all have Melrose attached to them, correct?
It depends where they live, yes. They'll either have Melrose or developer fees. There's kind of 2 programs that we have, but yes, we're going to get, as developers come in or house builders or whatever, there are fees associated with that, and that is to help offset expansion. It doesn't really do much doesn't do a lot for deferred maintenance, but it's supposed to really kind of help with expansion and that kind of stuff. Yes.
But won't that also affect our ADA? I mean,
hopefully,
more houses,
yes.
more kids.
That's it's interesting. I went on a bus tour with the mayor and all that kind of stuff to look at all the development. And if I remember correctly, there's over 1,000 houses, like 1,500 houses that are on the near-term cusp of being developed, right, or in process. And that's, I think, more than Yuba-City's had in a very long time. So that's all positive, but that takes a little time to happen. But I agree. I think this area is primed for a little growth, and hopefully that materializes and they come to our schools.
Will we have a committee or something like that where that comes to the board?
For what?
Anything, like the developer fees versus.
Not really. Well, I mean, I don't think that. I mean, not really a committee. I would say that the facilities master planning committee would be a good place to talk about our facilities needs. I mean, the Melrose and the developer fees are just a product of. I mean, those are fees that come in. The question is, what do we do with them, right?
Yeah, you're always tied to the facilities.
But like when we had talked about like the community that had come in about parks, right? Mm-hmm. And how that's really in one of our meetings, to me the perception was like that's you as a school district should be communicating what your wants are to the developers of those area of land or whatnot. And I mean, having gone through like the fees, if I'm building a house, it's not a Melrose, it's a set fee that I'm paying, and so I guess the question is, and maybe you don't know this, because I have no idea, but do we have a say in that?
So I'll speak a little to it, and I don't know if Doreen wants to, but Doreen, has more experience in institutional knowledge. This comes down to, in my opinion, is a lot of the relationships that you have with your local government, and if you think of Yuba City Unified School District and the county and the city, I mean, we're the major players in this area, right? So it's just having good relationships and talking about the where we have common goals and needs. And we have a regular standing meeting, and I forget what it's called. The community government liaison meeting. So that's a good place to share ideas like that. But I mean, the city and the county have control over that. But I think it's always good to have good relations and communication to express all of our goals and see where we can have common ground.
And I believe we actually did just raise our fees a year or two ago.
We did.
That makes sense. I think I saw a developer fee study that was done not too long ago. So
Yeah,
we did raise them.
As
Yeah,
far
we were on
as
the
do we
board.
have a lot of say so in it?
I mean,
let's keep it 100%. We don't have a lot of say so in that.
Yeah.
Period. It's the county and the city.
we don't have control, but like I said, I think there's influence that we all can have, and we're as far as looking for that we have this community. So to wrap it up, just kind of thoughts. The declining enrollment is a little concerning. I really am hoping, is it going to continue? Is the trend going to continue? We're going to get a little bounce back. I'm hoping for that bounce back. The inflation, there's a wild card, and it's really putting pressure on our budget right now. The 10% cap is just something we have to maneuver, and it couldn't come at a worse time. And as you all know, we've talked about it, but we do have facilities down here. But with this budget, we do have the ability to meet our 22-23 obligations and also multi-year projections.
Any additional questions for?
I have one question on one of the early slides, I guess, the third slide in. The expanded learning opportunities, the 3.2, is that ongoing or is that one time?
Oh, that's ongoing. Yes.
Okay, and then where are the actual question? That was it. Oh, I just wanted to say, I think that the school board in Yuba-Sutter used to have a budget committee. We don't have one of those anymore.
Well, there was a committee that met to review the budget presentation prior to.
I wasn't on it, but Julie was on it, and pardon? I think Julie was on it last.
She was.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you very
You
much.
don't want me on it?
So I'm going to be honest right here. I'm just going to ask a little protocol question. I'm not used to a public hearing via question and answer session with the public. Is that how things have been rolling around here?
The public hearing.
Yeah, but it's usually comments. Yeah, it's not the presenters or
not a
dialogue with the public.
Okay. So
yeah.
In my public comment then, I appreciate the fact that this budget is a fluid document with the 45-day revision, and I appreciate the work that goes in as we all try and make predictions in an uncertain future, especially with regards to our enrollments. I do know that financial managers tend to, with good reason, err on the side of caution, but I think we, as educators, err on the side of optimism. So I think that our hope is that our enrollments will go back up, that we're going to see our kids return to school post COVID, as well as the housing developments. So hopefully our enrollment's going to go up. But probably the biggest uncertainty we all face is the same uncertainty we face in managing our household budgets, and that is the pressures of inflation and rising costs for all of us. But I do think this year it is particularly challenging as we look at the legislature's budget called for a 16% increase to educational spending. So I don't know what kind of impacts that might have on the 45-day budget revision, depending on how the governor and legislature work out the final budget, whether it'll be a 16% increase in LCFF-based grant or whether it'll be the original 10%. So I guess I'll look for the 45-day revision and a hard copy of the budget for further review. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
This hearing is closed. All right, people, the next item of business is the consent agenda. Is there any item that any board members?
I think Mary wanted to take 10C separate.
10C?
I think she wanted to take 10C separately.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have a motion on the consent agenda with exclusion of 10C?
Make a motion, we approve. If there's no questions, the consent agenda with the exception of 10C.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Mr. Packard. All those, should we wait?
It's very, you still have a quorum.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
I make a motion that we approve 10C.
Well, she had comment. She's.
It's not her saying yes to it, she just didn't want to say yes to it.
So she'll be marked as like abstaining, so roll call vote.
All right.
Yes, we have a second.
I'll second.
Excuse me?
So we're just waiting on the second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, Laura?
Member Becker-Bully has stepped out of the room. Member Domi?
Yes.
Member Roscoe?
Yes.
Member Pretty?
Yes.
Member Quilty?
Yes.
Member Chakar?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes.
Thank you.
I believe she's going to abstain. She has to say that herself. Never mind. Now we move on to action items. Student cases as discussed in closed session. We have a motion.
Make a motion, we approve 11A with the modifications discussed in closed session.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve 11A with the modifications as discussed in closed session. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 11B, staff report on, this is about the election.
Yes.
Who's doing that?
I am. So
Okay.
as a matter of finalizing the requirements in order to establish new boundaries, and so this is the final step that would need to be reported to the county office regarding the election order, which is on page 547 of your agenda in terms of acknowledging that the election date will be November 8th. The trustee areas that will be up for re-election or election at that time, trustee area 1, 2, 4, and 5. And then the second component is you have a bylaw 9220 regarding the governing board and the candidates paying for their own participation in publications. So that is in your bylaw and acknowledging that through resolution. So recommend that you take action on ER 2122053 and ER 2122054.
Any questions for it? May we have?
I have one question. Is it our board policy that limits it to 200 words, or is it a function of the election?
That's the election.
It's the election.
Okay. I just didn't know.
Yeah, they count.
Yeah, I know they do.
Has the board ever discussed paying for candidate statements since it is laid out that it is an option? I know some local agencies do that. I just was wondering if that ever been a discussion.
I don't remember it ever being discussed.
Generally, any office you run for, you should pay for your own.
Pay for.
Well, but it's an option that the agency can. A lot of agencies do. It's like kind of a means of increasing access pay for the candidate statement. So I was just wondering if that was just how it's always been, or if it had actually been a discussion and a decision before.
I don't remember it ever being discussed. That doesn't mean it hasn't, but.
Correct, so the bylaws come forward for board action, and so that bylaw, to my knowledge, has not been asked to be revised in order to pay for the candidate's statements. So I don't remember. We can
Always paid, there's a way that it can be waived, but I've never done that. I'm not sure how it's waived, Nico. You'd have to ask Donna.
No, basically what it is at the elections office, there's a period before that if you get so many signatures, it actually waives it.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's how you
Right.
waive it. You actually,
Okay.
yeah, and that's
The
done with the
signature.
election office. Nothing to do with the board here necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You can get it waived by them.
It doesn't get waived, but it is in our bylaws that we can decide.
I get it.
whether or
We
not
could
to
pay for it,
Yeah.
but
I don't see why we should.
I don't know of any local
I was just asking.
group that does
for
it.
discussion.
Okay. So we need, unless there's further discussion, we need a
I make a motion that we
motion
approve.
for 053 and 054. Do you want to take them together? Oh, yeah. Okay. Mary?
So I make a motion to approve.
I think we should take them separately because they're resolutions that have to be passed by roll call vote.
We can take a second. I make a motion, we approve PR 2122-053.
I'll second that motion.
And we have a roll call vote, Laura?
Member Benicavoli?
Yes.
Member Jami?
Yes.
Member Roscoe?
Yes.
Member Pretty?
Yes.
Member Quilty?
Yes.
Member Jahar?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes. That was 053.
Make a motion, we approve PR 2122-054.
I'll second that one.
We have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, Laura?
Member Benicavoli?
Yes.
Member Jami?
Yes.
Member Roscoe?
Yes.
I'm sorry, is that?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Member Pretty?
Yes.
Member Quilty?
Yes.
Member Jahar?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion we approve the remaining items of the remaining components of item 11.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second.
What remaining?
What?
Board bylaws.
No, the bylaw has already been adopted, so you
Already
don't
been
have,
adopted, okay,
you don't have
fine.
to take action.
Okay, then we're
I
done.
think you've taken action on both items.
Oh, okay. So we're on 11C. Third reading for proposed revisions to the Yuba City Board policy.
Not sure if it's third or fourth reading. So it's the uniform complaint procedures. And there was questions regarding the option for appeal. The options were, and the current policy reads that the appeal process would be through the Department of Education. And so continues to be the recommendation of staff that the uniform complaint procedure specifically through the appeal process would go through the Department of Education and not the governing board.
Any questions on that?
Sorry, you said the current policy is that it goes to the Board of Education?
No, through the Department of Education.
Sorry.
My apologies.
Sorry, Department of
Yes.
Education, not through.
So there are two different complaint procedures, and I think that was the confusion. There's the complaint concerning an employee. That appeal process is through the governing board. The uniform complaint process has been to appeal through the Department of Education.
And the options right now that are on the table are either continue with that, where it goes to the Office of Education, or that it comes to the board.
Correct.
I'd like to make, if there's no more questions. And then we can go back to discuss the vote.
What's your motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve item 11C as presented.
A second.
Who made the second?
I did.
Mary. We have a motion and a second on 11C. Maybe we do it this way. You want a roll call vote?
Sure. Member Benicavoli?
Yes.
Member Jami?
No.
Member Roscoe?
Yes.
Member Pretty?
No.
Member Quilty?
Yes.
Member Jahar?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes.
Thank you.
Transitional kindergarten expansion plan, 11D.
So, Assistant Superintendent Aronson presented this at the last governing board meeting. It actually requires action by the board. So if there's any questions regarding the transitional kindergarten plan, she's here to give you for some PK plan. But she presented it and just needs formal action on the approval of the plan.
Do we have any questions, board?
So this is so we will have it at all school sites, or just we're expanding it to other sites? I don't.
We don't currently have it at all school sites, but that is the model that we want to eventually have it at all school sites. It's an expansion to all 4-year-olds. So over time, in a short amount of time, just in that couple of school years, we will have a very similar number of TK classrooms that we currently have kindergarten classrooms. So the plan is to roll out that expansion over the next 3 years in order to comply with the new laws of having TK through 12 within our school system for all 4-year-olds.
So will there be additional TK classrooms at school sites where they weren't last year? Will we have TK?
Yes. We will have TK at Park Avenue, at Terra Buena, and also Berry schools moving into next year that we don't have this year.
22-23 or 23-24?
22-23.
Okay. All right, I make a motion that we approve that.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
So this is a regular declaration that is made to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. It's required that we complete this form as a notification to the CTC that we will probably be in need of hiring staff who are on emergency, intern, or specialized credentials. Our first attempt or first efforts are to find a fully qualified teacher, but if we fall short of that, then we have to follow this pathway. And so in order to do that and expedite that process, which we will need that as we move into August, and we'll still be probably short in a number of positions. This allows us to move quickly when we find staff that fit one of these categories, meaning the emergency, intern, or specialized credentials. We bring this forward typically. We bring this forward to the board every year, and it's been done since 1994, so it's a very regular thing.
Any questions, board?
This is the STIPs or TIPS, right?
Yes.
And
That's some
part of it.
Yeah.
And the question that I have is, when we're looking for, educators that are in their teaching programs, is it also open to like students that are just entering into their credentialing program, or is it that there's a requirement that they must have completed it with the exception of like tests, supplemental tests, or?
So the pathway for students who are in their programs is to apply for their internship through the college, and so we have internship agreements with every local college that would send students our way, even some that are farther away. A more recent one is USC. Is even one who place staff here that are local, or at least leave that door open. So they would apply for an internship, and while they are completing their college program, that their college program would serve the purpose of being an intern. There is some qualification. They have to be intern ready.
Yeah.
Actually, so.
Perfect. Thanks.
So I have one more question about that, and I'm fully in support of this, but my question is do we provide some really decent support for teachers who come to us as interns, especially if they're in the beginning process of their educational system?
Yeah, so we currently are using so there are some criteria that are set by the college in our agreements with them. Call out what a lot of those are, and that's something that's fairly new in the last few years, that they've said, hey, if you're going to have an intern through our college, we expect this level of support. Okay. So we've been working with Martin and others to make sure that our mentors that are selected can fulfill those needs. So it's very similar to, it's not the same thing, but it's similar to like an induction.
Or the bits of
it's a lot of the same topics.
They have a mentor, just like if you were a newly credentialed teacher, a first year teacher, or a second year teacher, the intern also has a mentor.
I have a question. How far outside of California do we recruit? I mean, do we go to other states?
So the plans to do that were started, and then COVID came. So I would say in this next, what's that?
Nothing.
Yeah, and then so that made it difficult, if not impossible. And most colleges were not running live fairs. We actually only had one live fair this year with our local colleges, and that was at UC Davis.
So we did start at a specific
Yeah.
request, and so we had gone out to Texas as a starting point. But there were other, so there were conversations about Minnesota and some other areas.
And I've done research on colleges that would more likely bring candidates that mirror our population of students. And so that is in the goals for this upcoming hiring season in spring to start to prepare for that as we get closer to
I don't
that
think
season.
anybody's gonna come to California. Not right now, unfortunately. But it's a good idea, but I just think it's gonna be uphill battle.
That was one of the deterrents when we went to Texas, was that our cost of living in comparison to Texas.
Yes.
Because teacher candidates really were interested, and then when they heard about the housing and cost of real estate.
Yep.
You're telling Yuba-Sutter.
I know, right? That's why everybody says just goes living here. The only thing that I ask on this declaration is if I'm gonna approve it, I would prefer to see the dates in there and this form filled out, not signed, but at least filled out so we know, what we're doing here. That's all I ask.
Specifically, where are you referring to?
The form that we were given in our agenda.
So are you talking about page 2?
No, because the one we have has actually nothing filled in.
Yeah.
So typically, once it's approved, then I think it's the superintendent that usually signs this one. Then we fill it out and send it in. But we could do it ahead of time in the future.
I mean, it says that, it was enforced until June 30th, and it doesn't have a year, and I'm just one for.
Why don't you have that discussion with the superintendent?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Do we have a motion for 11E?
Motion we approve.
I'll second the motion. We have a motion by Ms. Donnelly and a second by Mr. Clothy. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 11F, non-reelection of probationary certificated employees.
So 11F is calling for the board's approval of a non-reelection of a probationary certificated employee. This is within essentially the first, up until March 15th of the second year of certificated employees' tenure with the district. They are a position where they may be non-reelected for return. So this is an employee that we are bringing forward to have that action taken. And they would not be returning, with your approval, this government would not be returning for the 22-23 school year.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion that we approve.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second by Mr. Packard, a motion by Mr. Pretty. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nico, is there a problem?
Yeah, it says we should do a roll call vote. I feel like we should do a roll call vote.
Where are you seeing that?
On the resolution.
Usually non-reelections are a roll call.
Okay, thank you, Nico. Let's go back. I didn't have that in front of me. 11F, could we, I think 11E and 11F, I don't have it in front of me.
11E doesn't have a resolution attached.
All right, 11F,
All right.
roll call vote.
Member Cavoli?
Yes.
Member Domi?
Yes.
Member Roscoe?
Yes.
Member Pretty?
Yes. Thank you.
Member Quilty?
Yes.
Member Chaparro?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes.
Thank you.
11G,
So 11G is the acceptance of the initial proposal or sunshine from the California School Employees Association, our local chapter 265. And it is attached, the initial proposal, so the articles that they open in negotiations are included in that attachment. So your approval is to accept the proposal so that we can begin and we will be beginning the negotiation process on actually Thursday this week.
Make a motion that we approve the openers.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, board. Board reports information. Do we have any committee reports?
Our committee did not. Okay. Is there anything from the charters?
No, I missed that meeting, so.
Okay. Jasmine, do we have any written communications from the public?
We have one.
Right.
Okay, to whom it corresponds. My name is Brenda Lucatero, and through this letter, I want to express my concerns as a mother in the wake of what recently happened in an elementary school in Texas. But we know that it is a problem that has happened in many other places, and to date, no action has been taken on the matter to end this problem. It hurts me a lot every time I hear this kind of news because I can't help but put myself in the shoes of those mothers who, like me, leave our little ones at school, waiting to see them at the end of the day and continue with our lives. Imagining that a tragedy happened before was not in my head, but now it is all the time. I live in fear that something will happen to my children. I feel that the school is not protected. Although I am not a mother directly affected by this tragedy, I demand more security cameras, guards all the time on the perimeter of the school, that the doors are kept closed all the time so that there is no opportunity for another madman to enter the school. I ask that the teachers be trained and find more drills for this type of event. It is important to talk about those issues with children, no matter how cruel it may be, because they are the victims of those monsters who are still out there and are just waiting for the day and time for another massacre. I have no knowledge to talk about weapons and what would be the best way to control their sale or the carrying of these. But I'm sure that we need to reevaluate that area and take action. We cannot sit idly by and wait for the next school to be taken and for lives to be taken. It is terrible to live in fear of what can happen at any time. Our anguish as desperate mothers trying to avoid disastrous situations. Pay more attention in all the schools in the country. Our little ones do not deserve to pay for the traumas that these psychopaths carry. Sincerely, Brenda Lucatero.
Thank you. Is that the only one?
Yeah.
Comments from the board representatives?
Good evening, board members, members of the public, and Indians who might be out there, and staff. Sina Litkins, President of the City Teachers Association. And here we are, after the end of the school year. I'd like to thank all the board members who came to the graduations. Those are definitely special events, and we appreciate your attendance at them as we all celebrate the end of the year with our students. It really is a special time as you watch their joy in their accomplishments and their plans for the future. So thank you for being there, and thank you for staff who were there at multiple graduations. I know that was a busy week for everybody, so thank you. Those events brought the end of the 2021-2022 school year. It was a long year, but here we are. Summer break will give us all a chance to recharge, a chance to reinvigorate our teaching. Lots of summer school going on, lots of teaching and learning still happening, and lots of adult learning happening. Teachers begin first by kind of getting your recharge, but then also already starting to plan for next year and figure out, like, so this is what went well this year, this is what I might do better next year, these are things I want to work on. Those are all the reflections we engage in. I, for one, sat on a train going to visit my grandchildren and was revising physics curriculum for next year with the enthusiasm, okay, I can make this even better. So that's kind of what we do for the summer. We engage in those informal learning opportunities as we work on our own stuff and our own reflections, but we also engage in more formal learning opportunities, whether it's additional college classes during the summer, additional professional development conferences, or whether it's accompanying a whole lot of people from Yuba City to go to Vegas. A lot of us went to Vegas for the Professional Learning Conference in Vegas. I understand that normally what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but let's hope that all of that great learning comes home with them.
I told them to bring it all home.
I understand that good things happened at that conference. As we move into the next year, we begin the planning for how we're going to address the health and wellness of both the adults and the kids in our classrooms. The safety concerns are not lost on any of us. As we listen to those parents and the sister tonight, we all live in a little bit more fear than we used to live in. But we're going to approach this new year with the optimism to figure out new ways we can engage kids, new ways we can address their needs, new ways we can support staff. I appreciate the superintendent's work as we began a meeting today to plan for that first welcome back activity. There's exciting opportunities for us to build this team that supports our kids here at Yuba City. And then I'd finally like to address in our hiring challenges as Yuba City works to fill the needs during a shortage of all personnel. I appreciate the importance of instructional coaches, but recognize the most important thing is a credentialed teacher in the classroom for every student. I do want to acknowledge that Yuba City Unified has made a strong commitment to supporting new teachers into the field. Yuba City's own induction program is a piece of that, but in addition, Yuba City has made that commitment to support those PIPs, those STIPs, those interns, and all new teachers as they begin this career. That's a huge commitment, and I appreciate the work that this district does to support new teachers as they begin in this profession. And I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, y'all know me, I'm Mercedes, and I'm representing our classified unit here. And I'm going to start by thanking you for approving our sunshine so that we can get busy on our important work starting on Thursday to get our negotiations rolling over the summer. I'm going to bring up the safety. I think that's a big thing right now, and we've obviously heard from some parents, both in a letter and in person and family members, that this is indicative of our community, that people are afraid of being, as a mass shooting, right? I mean, it's in school, it could be in the mall, it could be anywhere, but we want our children to be safe, we want our staff to be safe. Over the summer, right before school starts, our campus supervisors, we don't have a campus security, we have campus supervisors, which legally there's a little bit of a difference there, but they are going to be participating in the SD 390 training, which is 24 hours of training. It'll be over a 3-day period that they'll be coming in for to get them trained up. But I just want to make you aware that, and I brought this up in the past, our campus supervisors, which are charged with keeping our campuses safe, keeping intruders off our campus, keeping whatever's going on inside of there, if it's, illicit activities, whatever, those are our eyes and ears there, and they're there to help us. I mean, they're not going to necessarily protect us as a police officer would, but they're going to protect us and keep us safe, right? They make one of the lowest starting wages of any classified personnel. They're a step 24.5. I think we've adjusted our salary schedule to start at 23. So they're, 23 and a half? Yeah, it's just 3 steps away from the lowest paid. That needs to be addressed. If we want our kids safe, we want our property safe, we want our personnel safe, we gotta have somebody that's going to be invested in this job, and that, starting wage at $16 an hour is not always adequate. So we do need to think about things like that. we started summer school this week. It was different. It was different. We had these like massive amount of people supposed to be there, and they weren't quite all there. But I think everybody's calling people and trying to get them there. The kids that are there, they look like they're ready to learn. They're ready to push forward. We've had some, always first day you have a little bit of wonkiness, especially when the whole thing's on technology. But they're making progress already, and that's really nice to hear that our credit recovery kids are going to be making progress, earning those credits back.
Thank you. Comments from board members?
I'd like to say that I really enjoyed going to the graduations that I attended and promotions. It was joyful, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to the class of 2022 at Yuba-Sutter High School. It was very fun for me, and I always get a little teary and choked up. I'd also like to put it out there that if you're doing a big welcome back to school, that maybe one or two of us board members who aren't otherwise engaged in working might like to attend if that would be possible. It would be kind of fun to say welcome,
You'll all be invited.
You'll all invited. So, but that's about all.
Anyone else?
I'd like to say also that graduations were great. It's kind of a fun time.
Weather was good.
The weather was excellent. We weren't getting heat stroke up there. I really enjoyed it. Every year I've enjoyed it. That's probably one of the biggest misses I'll have. But I did. I really enjoyed watching the kids, seeing the kids. I almost got knocked over at River Bend, but hey, things happen. But I mean, not River Bend, but River Valley High School. But it was good. I enjoyed it, and I would like to see, attend as many as we can, especially the high school level, full board attending those now that COVID is down and we can have full graduations, because I think it's really important. But it was a good time. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the kids. I enjoyed seeing that success and hearing that success of the awards that they were getting and the scholarships. That was really good to hear, and seeing the excitement on their faces.
I know we approved the universal TK plan today, and we had a presentation at our last board meeting. And I did hear some concerns about the idea of a return to like an AM/PM kindergarten model. I know some people saw that as like a step backwards, and I know that was proposed as a solution to the challenges, particularly as far as facilities go, in implementing the universal TK model. So I just wanted to emphasize that we are undergoing like a rapid expansion. Was it 27 or 37 or which one was it?
It's it depends on
enrollment,
but probably around 32 classes.
Up there, adding a lot of classes in a very short amount of time, not adding that much space. So I just wanted to emphasize that's not a long-term solution, and if that happens, it's not just for fun. It's like we need a very particular challenge. So I just want to share that.
Well, we heard a lot tonight about school safety. We've made a lot of changes in Sacramento in the way we train people. But a lot of you remember, I'm sure Dina does, and probably Shelley, that the first school shooting in the United States was at Lyndhurst High. It was right here at home. It wasn't Sacramento, it was here. And I can tell you that the biggest deterrent to that kind of is be observant. Know who's on your campus. Know who doesn't look like they belong there. Danger is not seen in terms of race. But we have a media that tells us what danger looks like. Eric Houston didn't look like danger to those teachers. I think we all know why. So teachers and staff, we're training them to know who's on your campus and look, because we can go 100 extra miles to make our campuses safe, but you will see something that doesn't sit right or feel right. And you got to tell somebody. Armed guards, I mean, LA, I've done some evaluations down there, has their own police force. It's over 800 armed people. Do you think LA doesn't have shootings on campus? We'll think again. So we've got a lot of work to do about school safety. It's no easy answer, but there are a lot of people that have forgotten what happened at Lyndhurst. That's bad when you forget what happened at a school that close to home, because people were killed. 16-year-old Beeman Hill was a member of my church.
My cousin was there.
And so there are still people who are having lasting effects from what they saw there. And teachers that retired, many of them that have had lasting effects and nightmares. I don't know if any of you have seen anybody that's been shot. It's not a walk in the park. It leaves a lot of damage. Mr. Houston had a long rifle and revolvers as he walked across that quad. No one stopped him. So we have a lot of work to do. The other thing is, as we approach the elections, which are coming up in November, and we openly recruit people to fill some of our seats, let's remember that serving on this board in any elected position is an honor and a privilege. It allows you to serve the community. So hopefully when we recruit, we make it clear that that is what these positions are about. Not to hold grudges, they're not to entertain grudges, they're to recruit people that are committed, that understand the honor and the privilege of serving in an elected position. Superintendent. Okay. Our next meeting is in 14 days. The 28th of June. 28th. That being said, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.